This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Mid-season overview. And we're talking about every team in the National Football League and the way their season has went thus far and how it looks moving forward. We start with the division that we thought was going to be the best going into the season, the NFC West. And we start with the best team in that division, the Arizona Cardinals. Each team will be allotted 3 minutes to be broken down. So, give me the clock. Arizona Cardinals, here we go. Best record in all of football. I don't think a lot of us saw that coming. There are some. And I will say, I've seen some predict the Arizona Cardinals to win this division. And so, look, this division isn't over. And this team has played some outstanding football. Keep in mind, they got off to this 7-1 start with 2 different quarterbacks. They've had to endure some injuries at that quarterback position. Drew Stanton had to come in and hold it down for a couple of weeks. And Carson Palmer has come back and he's picked up where he left off before the injury, not turning the football over, which is a big surprise to me because I thought that Carson Palmer had gotten to the point in his career where I knew what he was as a passer and that he was going to turn the football over. 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. This team has not turned the football over. And the reason why they have that 7-1 mark right now is because they're not turning the football over. Plus 10 in the turnover differential will win you a lot of games in this league. 4th fewest points surrendered. We all knew coming into the season that the Arizona Cardinals would be one of the best defensive teams in the league. What we couldn't count on was the fact that they would be this good defensively. I've talked about that home field advantage. Well, they've continued with that home field advantage. They're 4-0 at home this season, 5-0 in the NFC Conference, which is huge because if we start talking tiebreakers, we start talking about teams being tied at the end of the season. The Arizona Cardinals have put in a lot of work early on this season, getting it done where it matters the most, inside the NFC Conference. They're 1-0 in the division, and that worries me right now because despite the fact that they're 7-1 and they're playing good football, and right now they have a 2-game lead over everyone in their division, they've only played 1 divisional game, so that lets you know that they've got a lot of work to do. This is a team that last season didn't get it done within the division. So you need to see the Cardinals get it done in the division. Right now, we don't have enough evidence that this is going to be something that they will be able to do consistently this season. Only having beat the 49ers at home, they still got to go to Seattle, to San Francisco, to St. Louis. And so they still got 5 divisional games left. Those 5 games can go a long way in determining who will win this division. Right now, Cardinals are looking sharp. This is what their division looks like, or excuse me, rest of their schedule looks like moving forward. St. Louis at home in Week 10, Week 11, at home again for Detroit. At Seattle in Week 12, at Atlanta in Week 13, home for Kansas City in Week 14, at St. Louis in Week 15, home for Seattle in Week 16, and finish up the season on the road at San Francisco. So that game could be for the division right there, depending on how they're able to manage the rest of their schedule. That's a very tough slate, if you ask me. You got some divisional games. Look, you've got the Rams twice, you've got the 49ers one more time, and you've got the Seahawks twice. You're going to have to take care of business. That's where this division is going to be won, right there, in those 5 games. Kansas City at home, going to be a tough matchup, but that's a winnable football game. Detroit, that could be 2 first-place teams when it's all said and done, when that game takes place. But that's a doable schedule, but you have to take care of business. Keep in mind, you've got 7 games remaining, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games remaining on your schedule, 5 of which will be in the division. That's the Arizona Cardinals and their season outlook thus far. They're taking care of business, leading this division at 7-1 at the midpoint of the season. We move on to the next team in this division, the Seattle Seahawks. So we jump into the Super Bowl defending champion Seattle Seahawks, and the first place you start is that vaunted home field advantage. Well, they've already had that tarnished just a bit coming into this season as they've lost to the Dallas Cowboys at home. And so 3-1, not bad, but not what we're used to from this team. But if they can get back on track and finish up the season at 7-1 at home, that will go a long way to not only having this team make the postseason, because that's not a given at this point. At 5-3, at the midpoint of the season, nothing is guaranteed to this Seattle Seahawks football team. And so they have to play as if each game has their season riding on it right now, because this NFC conference is jam-packed full of teams looking to get in, and this division itself could eventually come down to the final week with 3 teams jockeying for 2 spots in the playoffs. So, or even 1 maybe. You just never know. So if you're Seattle, you got to play this thing out and play it to the best of your abilities, and you got to take care of home. That's been your calling card. That's been your staple. Getting it done at home. You've already lost once at home. Pretty much, it's safe to say you don't have a lot of room for error losing on your home turf, especially if you're going to drop games on the road. Speaking of which, you're 3-2 in the conference right now, which is a solid record, not great. And we know that's what we start looking at when we start talking tiebreakers. After we get past head-to-head matchups, we start looking at conference records in terms of who's getting in and who's not. So if you're Seattle, got to take care of business within the conference. 3-2 is okay, but it's not great. You have to be better moving forward. And a lot of those games coming up in the division will go a long way in either strengthening that conference record or knocking it down and making you a less and less viable option to make it to the postseason. 5th most points scored in the NFC. And when we look at this Seattle Seahawks team, we expect defense. Well, defense hasn't been all that great this season, but the offense is scoring more points than we're used to. Again, 202 points scored on the season, 5th most in the NFC conference. You're 0-1 in the division right now. On the road, you lost to St. Louis earlier on in the season. And so you've got a lot of division games, much like the Arizona Cardinals. You've got 5 games remaining in this division. Got to take care of business. Your inability defensively to hold teams down is probably the most surprising thing to this point in the season. You gave up 30 to Dallas, 30 to San Diego, 28 to St. Louis, and 24 to Oakland. That's a lot of points for a defense that we expected to be borderline great this season. And this is what the remaining schedule looks like. So you're 5-3 right now with these 8 games remaining. Home for the Giants, at Kansas City, home for Arizona, at San Francisco, at Philadelphia, home for San Francisco, at Arizona, home for St. Louis to finish up the season. That is murderer's row, if you ask me. Okay, this Giants game, must win. Okay, but after that, you're at Kansas City. It's hard to win. At Arrowhead, and they're playing great football, are the Chiefs right now, so that's a toughie. Arizona came into your place and beat you last year, so you already know what that game is about, and they're leading the division as we speak. San Francisco, that home field advantage thing for them, not really working out too well, so you could go in there on Thanksgiving night and get a W, and you know you're going to have to play them 2 weeks later at your place. So those are huge games. Philadelphia could be leading the NFC East when you get there. They may or may not have the services of Nicholas Foles. All of those things being said, this is a team that needs to play championship football. You know you're going to get every team's best shot each and every single week. You have to take full advantage of any opportunities that may come your way down the stretch if you want to not only have a chance at repeating as Super Bowl champions, but just to make the postseason. You may not win the division, but if you can just get in, you got to feel like if we can just get our foot in the door, we can make some noise in the NFC conference. That's going to do it for the Seattle Seahawks. Let's move on to the next team, the San Francisco 49ers. So we move on to arguably the most disappointing team in this division at the midpoint of the season, the San Francisco 49ers, right now residing at 3rd place in the division at 4-4. There were a couple of things that we knew to be truths going into the season. You were going to be missing Navarro Bowman for a long stretch of football. You were going to be missing Aldon Smith for an extended period of time going into the season. So you expected this defense to struggle. No Dante Whitner, no Carlos Rogers, no Terrell Brown. Secondary is going to look a lot different. So there were some things that we thought, okay, defensively they may struggle, but the defense hasn't really been the issue outside of the problem of not getting pressure on the quarterback, which was something that we also knew was going to be a problem going into the season because there was going to be no Aldon Smith. So the 13 sacks right now in the season, not good enough. That's something that will improve with the addition of Aldon Smith here in a little bit. But the things that we didn't expect was for this team to struggle offensively the way that they have, for them to have an identity crisis and lose, I guess you could say lose the identity of self. They don't know who they are right now. They're not running the football right now. They've got more passing attempts on the season than rushing attempts. 265 passing attempts versus 231 rushing attempts. And keep in mind, 54 of those rushing attempts are Colin Kaepernick. That's not good enough. If you want to scale back Frank Gore, I understand, but you also got a young thoroughbred sitting on the bench over there in Carlos Hyde. How about you give him the football? He's only got 50 carries on the season. Not good enough if you are the San Francisco 49ers. So they need to run the football more. I've stressed that enough. Can't really beat that in any more than I already have. And so the fact that you're 0 or 2-2 at home, home has not been home sweet home. Levi Stadium has not been the home field advantage that you thought it was going to be when you built this stadium. So you need to play better at home. Second halves of games have been terrible for this 49ers team. We saw what happened to them at home against Chicago. We saw what happened to them in the second half at home versus St. Louis. We saw what happened to them in the second half of a game that they ended up losing to another opponent. Can't really think of who it is right now, but they've struggled in the second half of football games this season, and so they need to turn it up and become a much better football team in the second half. Outside of that second half of that St. Louis Rams game, you've struggled in the second half all season long. You have given up 10 more points than you've earned on the season, so you've scored 168 points, which is not that good, but you've given up 178 on the season, so offensively, you need, because 178 points given up isn't that bad, but 168 points scored, that's terrible. So you got to get better as a football team scoring points if you are the 49ers. And this is what your remaining schedule looks like. At New Orleans, at the Giants, home for Washington, home for Seattle, at Oakland, at Seattle, home for San Diego, home for Arizona. You've got a lot of home games left, 4 to be exact, at home, and they're all winnable games. That's a tough schedule, though. You make no mistakes about it. New Orleans is one of the toughest places to go and get a win on the road. You got to go there. You got to go to Seattle. We know about their home field advantage, and so it's going to be a tough go of it. But if you're going to make the postseason, this is what you've done. You've put yourself in a hole at 4-4. You've got to finish the season out no worse than 6-2 if you want a shot to get into the postseason. And right now, your 1-2 divisional mark and your 3-3 conference mark don't do you any favors. If you're going to make it to the postseason, you're going to have to win, and win now, starting probably, most likely, with this game against New Orleans in week number 10. Even if you don't get that one, you've got to beat the Giants next week in New York. That's not up for debate. And you've got to beat the Redskins the week thereafter. And you got to start getting some wins if you are the San Francisco 49ers. Now we move on to the final team in this division, the St. Louis Rams. So now we're talking about the last place team in this division at 3-5, bringing up the rear. It's the St. Louis Rams. Here's a team that their season got off to a tumultuous start before it even got started, with the injury to Sam Bradford again for the season, and so they were scrambling from the jump. They probably lose a game against the Minnesota Vikings that they probably could have won had they had some competent quarterback in play. Now the score may not indicate that they had a chance to win that game, but trust me, mentally their psyche was damaged going into that game, and I think they're a different team now than they were in week 1. And so you look at this team right now, and there are a couple of huge issues as to why they're 3-5 on the season and why they're out of playoff contention right now in the NFC. First things first, you got to take care of home. This team is 1-3 at home and 2-2 on the road. So something's not right with that picture when you've got more road victories than you do home victories. In this league, if you can't win at home, you don't win in this league. End of discussion. The good teams take care of home. You can go 4-4 on the road and 6-2 at home and find yourself with 10 wins on the season. But you got to take care of home because you're not winning 6 games on the road. You're not winning 5 games on the road. Teams in this league struggle on the road. It's just what happens. So you've got to be able to win at home. Rams haven't been able to do that. Another big issue with this team, 71-point differential. Negative 71-point differential to be exact. That's the 4th worst in the NFL, which translates simply, you're not scoring enough points and you're giving up way too many. Right now, you've scored 149 points on the season, which is worst in the NFC conference. You're not scoring enough points. You're not doing enough to help out your defense, who is giving up points themselves. So they need you to score more points, and you're not. If you've noticed, all your wins have come in low-scoring ball games where the defense hasn't given up a lot of points and the offense did just enough to win. Outside of that win against Seattle, which the special teams unit stepped up in that game and helped you out largely on the offensive side of the football. So this is a team that needs to score more points, be more consistent on the offensive side of football. Of course, 14 sacks on the season. That's something that we didn't expect. We thought this team would come into the season and really wreak havoc with their front four. It hasn't happened. They're getting better. 8 sacks last week. So I just told you they had 14 on the season. 8 of them came last week against San Francisco. So they're starting to heat up. But they needed that to start when the season started, not in week number 9. So this team is starting to get pressure on the quarterback. And now the question it begs with this St. Louis Rams team is, will Jeff Fisher be your head coach moving into next year? Will you draft a quarterback in the first round? The rest of this season will tell the story as to whether those two things will occur or not. If Austin Davis comes through and wins some games down the stretch and you finish up this season at 8-8, which means you would have to go 5-3 down the stretch, or if Austin Davis is able to show flashes of greatness, maybe you don't draft the first round quarterback. But I think that at the end of the day, you'll decide that you need to draft a quarterback next season. You'll decide that, I don't know if Jeff Fisher is the right guy or not. I think he is, but your management might think otherwise, and you might go in a different direction. There's only so many times you can lose as a franchise before you decide to move on from the head coach that you already have. And so right now, you've been getting it done in the division, 2-1. Hey, if you could play the division all season long, you would have a winning record right now. But the problem is you're 3-4 in the conference, which means you're not beating teams in the NFC, and you're not getting it done at home. That's a problem. That's why you're 3-5 on the season. That's going to do it for the NFC West Conference. We'll move on to the next one as we continue to break down the midseason outlook for every single team in the National Football League. See you in a bit.